We frequently see public figures face career-ending scandals, only to witness a sudden reputational collapse followed by a massive financial or professional rebound. In 2004, Martha Stewart was convicted of insider trading and sentenced to 5 months in prison. Within a year of her sentencing, her company's stock price more than tripled. In 2003, Kobe Bryant was accused of sexual assault. By the end of the decade, he held the top-selling jersey in the NBA. These events create a specific psychological dilemma for loyal supporters. They force a direct collision between a consumer's deep emotional attachment to a brand and their own personal moral standards. This collision generates severe cognitive dissonance. The consumer's brain immediately seeks a resolution to avoid the psychological discomfort of supporting someone who violates their ethical boundaries. To maintain their loyalty, the consumer has to find a psychological loophole. They need a cognitive mechanism that allows them to continue supporting the transgressor without feeling like a morally compromised person. Moral psychology has traditionally explained this through a process called moral rationalization. Under this model, the consumer acts as a motivated, intuitive lawyer, arguing in defense of a desired outcome. Rationalization works by reconstruing the transgression itself. The consumer systematically minimizes, justifies, or excuses the bad behavior, which temporarily reduces the psychological friction of their continued support. But this strategy carries a heavy cost. It forces the consumer to adopt a permissive stance toward objectively objectionable behavior. Excusing a crime actively threatens their own moral self-image and invites social judgment. Behavioral scientists have identified a second, highly efficient cognitive escape route used to resolve this tension: moral decoupling. Moral decoupling is a psychological separation process. Rather than excusing the act, the consumer selectively dissociates their judgment of the performance from their judgment of the person's morality. This separation allows consumers to generate steady support for a transgressor while simultaneously condemning the transgression. They never have to excuse the underlying crime. To determine if these two pathways actually operate differently in the human brain, researchers set up a controlled laboratory experiment. Participants read a scenario describing a star hockey player who led his team to an Olympic gold medal, but upon returning is discovered to have committed domestic abuse. The researchers then measured the extent to which participants used either moral rationalization or moral decoupling to justify their ongoing support for the athlete. The data revealed a sharp split in how the two groups processed the crime. Participants who relied on rationalization cognitively altered their view of the transgression, judging the domestic abuse as significantly less immoral. Higher reliance on moral rationalization directly predicted lower judgments of immorality. The decoupling group showed no cognitive shift, keeping their moral judgments highly negative. But for athletic evaluations, the effects invert. Moral decoupling strongly predicted higher ratings of the player's competence. This statistical divergence demonstrates that the two cognitive strategies secure consumer support through distinct mechanisms. One alters the perception of the crime, while the other isolates and elevates the perception of the professional's competence. It is worth asking if these are truly two different cognitive processes, or simply minor variations of the exact same excuse-making mechanism. Researchers conducted a confirmatory factor analysis across 327 participants to test the underlying psychometric structure. The results show a clear discrepancy. The two-factor model fits the aggregate data significantly better than a one-factor model, confirming these constructs are psychometrically independent. Translated into practical terms, this means the human brain utilizes two entirely separate internal algorithms to process brand forgiveness. We have mathematical evidence that the mental act of separating the art from the artist relies on a different cognitive architecture than excusing the artist's behavior. To move from correlation to causal proof, a second study actively primed participants to use either a rationalization strategy or a decoupling strategy before evaluating a new scandal. This time, participants read about the visionary CEO of a prominent consumer electronics company who was confirmed to have supported racist and sexist hiring policies. The baseline behavioral outcome was identical for both groups. Both the rationalization prime and the decoupling prime successfully led to high consumer support and an equal likelihood of continuing to purchase the company's products. but the underlying internal logic they used to reach that decision sharply diverged. For the rationalization group, the severity of the moral transgression and CEO performance were cognitively tethered together. Higher judged immorality dragged down performance perception. By contrast, the decoupling group exhibited a near-zero correlation. They completely severed the psychological link between the two variables. For these consumers, their views on the CEO's leadership performance and their views on the CEO's immorality operated in total cognitive isolation. Moral decoupling allows a consumer to maintain total condemnation of a moral transgression while simultaneously maintaining total admiration for professional performance. This framework scales up to the highest levels of public discourse and political survival. The 1998 impeachment of President Bill Clinton serves as a prime real-world stress test of moral decoupling. Those motivated to support the president largely acknowledged the moral failure of his actions. Instead of excusing his behavior, they forcefully argued that his private life had no bearing on his ability to govern the country. The opposition took the exact inverse approach, arguing that personal morality and presidential performance are deeply intertwined and structurally impossible to decouple. The crux of the national debate was not actually about the morality of the act itself. The debate was entirely about the structural relationship between morality and performance. Surviving a high-profile scandal rarely requires convincing the public you are innocent. It requires convincing the public that your personal flaws do not degrade your professional output. When fans face a transgression by an admired figure, their overriding motivation is to preserve their own moral identity without abandoning their deep brand attachments. Relying on rationalization is a highly dangerous strategy for brand management. It forces supporters to defend the indefensible, creating immense psychic friction and exposing them to social scrutiny. Moral decoupling provides a low-friction cognitive escape hatch. This mental architecture enables what researchers call the tip-of-the-hat, wag-of-the-finger paradigm. The consumer can confidently admire the talent while safely and loudly admonishing the behavior. By strictly separating the art from the artist, moral decoupling successfully resolves the consumer's cognitive dissonance paradox. It allows consumers to keep their heroes without ever sacrificing their own moral compass.